Hey everyone, my name is Vladimir Jutia. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Let's begin. We're learning about the Vatican's next steps as millions around the world mourn the death of Pope Francis, details about the pontiff's funeral, and when the secret process to elect the new pope will begin. And Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is wrapped up in yet another scandal. What we know about the second group chat he shared classified information in, and how the White House is responding. Plus, Harvard University sues the Trump administration. We're following the escalating feud as the university fights the White House over federal funding. This is CBS News 24/7. The Vatican has set a funeral for the late Pope Francis. The funeral will be held this Saturday at St. Peter's Basilica, where thousands of mourners have traveled today to pay their final respects. Meanwhile, cardinals from around the world are descending on Rome ahead of Francis's funeral, and in the coming weeks, they will choose his successor. Among them, the Archbishop of New York, Timothy Cardinal Dolan. He shared his thoughts and memories of the late pontiff with CBS News evening news anchor Maurice Dubois.
When I heard the news, when I went into my chapel to pray for him, what was I thinking of? He called me when my mom died. He called me the second week into COVID and said, "How's New York doing?" He called me on October 7th and he said, "How are my Jewish friends in New York doing?" These are the things that move you. There's sort of a communal fascination and affection for him. You kind of expect it among Catholics, but when you see it outside, you're thinking, wow, the impact this man had. People felt hugged by him.
When you talk about that, people of other faiths coming up to you and expressing those deep condolences, not superficial ones, why do you think that is?
I remember his first Sunday in Rome after he was Pope. And what did he speak about? He spoke about tenderness. To hear the Pope speak about tenderness, mercy, compassion, love, this is what moved us about him.
CBS News papal contributor Canada Moss joins us now to talk more about this. So, Canada, you can perhaps describe right now, there are probably millions of people who saw the Hollywood film Conclave who have some inkling of what goes in to electing a new pope. But we need to separate fiction from reality. So describe for us the actual process that will happen.
Hi, Vlad. Great to be here. So in terms of the process of electing the Pope, conclave, as it's known, the cardinals will meet in about 2 weeks. Many of them will have already been there for the funeral. And they will meet at the Vatican in St. Peter's in the Sistine Chapel to elect the next Pope. They are sequestered, so they are not influenced by things in the outside world, and they cast a series of ballots. Only those under the age of 80 are eligible to vote. And in order to be elected as the next pope, the pope needs a 2/3 majority. And a majority of the cardinals who will be voting are actually Francis appointees. But this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up with someone just like Francis. There's a lot of politicking behind the scenes.
So let's talk about some of the leading contenders. You and I have discussed this before, but back in 2013, I was a foreign correspondent. I was sent to Ghana to profile Cardinal Peter Turkson, who was at the time, had just come off of being the Bishop of Gold Coast, was a renowned and respected cardinal. He was in the top 3 of the contenders. Obviously, Francis went on to become the Pope. Is he still in the running? And who are some of the others that may be potentially considered?
It's a good question. So Peter Turkson is still in the running, but so is another African cardinal, Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo from the Congo, who holds a very high up leadership position in the African church and was quite friendly with Pope Francis as well. And both of them can be considered conservatives. There are a number of Italian candidates, Pietro Parolin, who met with Vice President Vance recently to discuss immigration, and is the Vatican Secretary of State, Matteo Zuppi from Bologna, who might be considered one of the progressive candidates, who's been very vocal in his support of LGBT Catholics and advocating for the poor, and Luis Antonio Tagle from the Philippines, who was a contender in the last conclave and is also seen as the Pope Francis of Asia.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Cardinal Tagle, as you know, Canada, was, from reports that I've read, Pope Francis's pick, or at least his ideal for potential successor. The question that you and I have batted around for years is the conservative nature of non-European cardinals, the African cardinals, the Asian cardinals, those that come from the Americas, Latin America specifically, tend to be very conservative. It is true that younger people are becoming increasingly conservative, but how could that sort of go against the things and the ideals that Francis championed?
Well, I think with someone like Tagle, he's interesting because he's been very involved in something called the New Evangelization, which is kind of a missionary outreach to Catholics to sort of come back to the church. And that was championed by John Paul II and Benedict XVI, both of whom are seen as conservatives. So Tagle's involvement in that might help him win votes from conservative cardinals, particularly in Africa. Whatever the case, whoever's going to be elected, they're going to have to win votes from cardinals all over the world. No longer can someone be elected a cardinal just because they're from Europe and they could rely on the sort of 33% of votes they could get from Italian cardinals as they could back in the, say, 1960s. The College of Cardinals looks very different now. But whomever is elected, whether they're a conservative or a progressive like Zuppi and Tagle, they are going to have to walk in the shoes of Pope Francis, who certainly changed the tone of the Catholic Church such that the future Pope will have to be a moral authority who leads by example.
So, final question then, Canada. Will, in your estimation, the new Pope, will they, hopefully, I guess, for the world's billion Catholics, continue some of the reforms and the progressive nature of Francis's papacy? Or could we see a swing back, perhaps more, as I mentioned earlier, to a, if not a conservative tilt of the papacy, perhaps a, let's not use the word conservative, but perhaps a more traditional one? And how would that be seen by laymen?
Well, generally, when you have a pope like Pope Francis, who has been quite bold in the moves that he's made and quite progressive in terms of the Catholic Church, there might be a pendulum swing back towards more traditional values. If we see that, I think that's going to disappoint progressive Catholics and also many non-Catholics who saw Pope Francis as a kind of modernizer. Whatever happens, this is a pivotal moment for the Catholic Church, and whomever is elected Pope next will be the one who sets the tone for the Catholic Church in the 21st century.
Fascinating. Always great to talk to you, my friend. Thank you, Canada Moss. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if we can go back to Rome and join up with CBS News Papal contributor Francis Rocka. Hi, Francis. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, how are you, Vlad?
Hey, how are you? All right. So, as you know, mourners have been pouring into Vatican City to pay their respects. What are we hearing from those mourners who have come to just be close to Francis before his funeral?
Well, it's a curious thing because of timing. Yesterday, the day of the Pope's death, was also a national holiday in Italy. The weather is beautiful. It's Easter week. It's a time when many people, international visitors, are on vacation. Pilgrims are also coming here. So there's a real mix of people in the square and all over. And so the people who are coming here specifically to mourn Pope Francis are mixed in with people who are here for perhaps religious reasons, perhaps just for vacation. And so it's a very curious coexistence, let's say. But I think it's not a somber mood. There's a sense of solemnity, a sense that an era has finished. A man who, to the last, was out there meeting people, being very active, is suddenly dead. That's solemn. But I don't think that you have people are distraught. There's not a sense of overwhelming sadness.
So, who do we expect to attend the funeral on Saturday?
Well, we already know, of course, that President Trump is coming, which was not a given. Typically in this situation, maybe the Vice President Vance, who met with the Pope hours before his death on Sunday. But so Trump is coming. We know that the President and the Prime Minister, President and Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Great Britain are coming, the President of Brazil. So those are some of the names that we already have so far. It will be interesting to see. The last papal funeral was 20 years ago when John Paul, and that was not only George W. Bush came, but former President Clinton came, the presidents of France, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, I think Prince Charles was there. So there were also some controversy over Mugabe was there from Zimbabwe, sorry. So we'll see if any leaders come this time that might create some controversy by their presence.
Indeed. All right, Frank Rocka, thank you very much for joining us this morning from Rome. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to have a lot more coverage from Rome in the next half hour, but let's get to some other news of the day. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, let's talk about him. He's facing some backlash after sources confirmed to CBS News that he shared plans about impending airstrikes in Yemen in a second signal group chat. The group chat reportedly included his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney. I want to bring in CBS News senior national correspondent Charlie D'Agata, who's at the Pentagon for us this morning. Charlie, this is sort of remarkable. My wife and I were joking yesterday that she barely knows my schedule when I'm here anchoring CBS Mornings and CBS News 24/7. She always learns after the fact when she actually catches me on television. So this is sort of a unique situation. I guess the question is, what are you hearing from the Pentagon? How are they responding?
Yeah, well, so Secretary Hegseth earlier this morning, right from the briefing room, although to Fox and Friends, not an actual briefing, it wasn't so much like a straight-up denial, but more of a deflection. He once again said that there was no classified information shared in either of those chats on Signal, the first one exposed by The Atlantic, the second one we confirmed over the weekend. Again, he lashed out at reporters for targeting the Trump administration, trying to drag down the president's agenda. He accused them of peddling old stuff. No one is texting war plans. This is more of what he had to say.
We're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Right. So those employees, he went on to accuse 3 officials that were put on administrative leave last week in a leak investigation for once again leaking information to the media. In his words, once a leaker, always a leaker. Those 3 individuals, including his own senior advisor, Dan Caldwell, they released a joint statement last week saying, after their dismissal, saying, in part, at this time, we have not been told exactly what we've been investigated for, or even if there is a real investigation of leaks, in air quotes, to begin with.
I guess the next question, given the number of people who have left the Department of Defense, either who've been removed or who have left of their own volition, can you describe as you're hearing it, the Defense Secretary's relationship with staff at the Pentagon?
In a word, toxic, I suppose, the people that we've spoken to. We can also report, and Secretary Hegseth confirmed it this morning, that his own chief of staff, Joe Casper, is heading to another job at the Pentagon. So he's been dismissed. And honestly, Vlad, it's like 10 little Indians here, right? We have the sort of front house office of this OSD that we have spokespeople that we usually get briefings from a couple times a week, that we reach out to if we need to get some sort of editorial support in a story. They've kind of ceased to exist. His right-hand man is Sean Parnell. It's kind of close hold. They release a sort of situational rep, sit rep every week on a Friday to give the public an idea, if not necessarily the journalists, an idea of what they have tried to accomplish. But in terms of us trying to get information, that has become more difficult. I just spoke to a senior official right out in the parking lot, a 4-star general. I said, hey, look, what's new? He said, if I knew, I couldn't tell you. You know, everything is close hold here. I know the leak investigations are underway, as you and I have discussed already. They've prompted the idea of even having lie detector tests and polygraphs. It's worth noting that the 3 individuals who were dismissed last week had not undergone polygraphs. They made that point clear in their statement as well. So, you know, a lot of tension here. Whether or not the defense secretary's job is on the line is a matter of debate, but whether he and his department are under fire is not.
So fascinating, Charlie. I spoke to Admiral William McRaven this morning on CBS Mornings. As you know, he led the raid that killed Osama bin Laden back in 2011. And he, you know, in his book, he just says if people will just own up to their mistakes, you will get goodwill from not only staffers, but also the American people, or the people who are out there to support you and cheer you on. And this seems like it could have all been avoided. But given the kind of guy that the secretary is, it was probably not going to happen. Charlie D'Agata reporting from the Pentagon for us, as always, my friend. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Vlad.
Let's go now to White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, what is the president saying about this latest signal chat of the defense secretaries?
Yeah, Vlad, it's all quiet on the Hegseth front here at the White House. There's no indication that there's any effort from the White House or within the administration to make any moves against Hegseth to possibly replace him. We heard from the president yesterday at that Easter egg roll on the White House South Lawn, where he said his embattled secretary is doing a great job, and he dismissed any of the reports about Hegseth as either fake news or just disgruntled employees who are lashing out at him. Of course, we heard Hegseth's defense yesterday and this morning saying that those employees are spreading this fake news and cautioned against it. However, we have confirmed that Signal group chat, that second group chat, where he was sharing some sensitive information with his wife, his brother, and his personal attorney about potential airstrikes happening in Yemen. And of course, this is just the latest groundswell against Pete Hegseth leading the Department of Defense. As we also heard from John Elliott, who was a former top Pentagon spokesperson, who said that under his leadership, the department has really crumbled. It's been a mess. He called it the month from hell this last month, starting with the first Signal group chat that we learned about from The Atlantic, and saying that, Hegseth, his ability to lead the Pentagon is really in question because of all of these actions that we have seen. But as of now, it seems like the White House is sticking behind him pretty defiantly. Any reporting that suggests otherwise, the White House has been striking down. Vlad.
All right. Olivia Rinaldi for us reporting from the White House. Thank you, Olivia. Completely switching gears, Karen Reed, she is back in a Massachusetts courtroom for her second murder trial. We'll bring you the very latest just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Right now, opening statements in Karen Reed's retrial are underway. She's accused of killing a Boston police officer who was her boyfriend. She claims she's the victim of a conspiracy. CBS News Boston reporter Penny Commit filed this report moments before today's trial began.
Well, now that a very long jury selection process is over, opening statements are expected today in Karen Reed's second trial. And some things are going to look very similar to the first trial. She is still facing 3 charges. There is, again, over 150 names on the potential witness list. We, again, expect this trial to take 6 to 8 weeks. But something that's going to be different is going to be the opening statements that will be presented today, mostly because they're going to be presented by 2 different attorneys. The state has hired a new prosecutor, Hank Brennan. You may know him because he was the defense attorney for the infamous mobster Whitey Bulger. He plans to use some of Reed's media clips that she's done so far in his opening statements today. And then Alan Jackson, rather than David Yannetti, is going to give Reed's opening statements for her defense team. They plan to show a photo of John O'Keefe's arm, the injuries that were on his arm. Now, the judge is still deciding if they can say it was from a dog attack, because that's what they claimed during the first trial. So hopefully we'll get an answer on that today. But they plan to show that photo, and then something they can't do is use their third-party culprit theory. That's where they say not only is Karen Reed innocent, but that other people are responsible for John O'Keefe's death. They can, however, establish that during testimony throughout the trial. They can mention it in closing statements, but they cannot mention it in openings today. So that's really the foundation of what we're expecting going into opening statements today. And remember, Reed has also appealed this case all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. We should get a decision from them if they're going to take this case on Monday. Back to you.
All right, folks, we'll bring you the latest developments in this trial. And, of course, you can watch gavel-to-gavel coverage on CBS News Boston. Moving on to this, President Trump says there can be a slowing of the economy if the Federal Reserve does not lower interest rates. In a Truth Social post, the president called the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, quote, Mr. Too Late, and a, quote, major loser. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joins me now in Studio 55. So, Kelly, with the markets already unsteady, traders and investors worried about the future, is this really the right time for the president to be calling the Fed chair a loser and threatening to remove him, which we've never really seen before? The Federal Reserve chair is supposed to be sort of apolitical.
So I think if you talk to investors, they would say this is not the right time. Now, we have seen the White House in past try to make comments that they didn't love what the Fed chair was doing, but in terms of an outright removal, no. Now, I think before this comment yesterday, a lot of investors were thinking, this is just noise. We've seen the president do this before. But the fact that this has continued to escalate, a lot of investors I'm talking to are saying that there is a fear now that you could see the president try to take legal action. Now, for context, there is no legal precedent to remove the Fed chair without cause. But that doesn't mean that the president couldn't try to undermine and sort of just any hint of this, sort of back and forth between these two institutions that are supposed to be separate. Yeah, you're likely going to see a lot more uncertainty. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, came out with their report today. And I want to read you one line that they said was important to stability. They said, quote, monetary policy credibility will be important in all cases, and central bank independence remains a cornerstone. So basically what they are saying is in order for there to be growth, in order for there to be stability, these central banks need to be remaining independent. And I do think that that was referencing what's happening here in the U.S.
And so if the president were to fire or remove the Fed chair, I mean, the results could be cataclysmic. We're already seeing what's, I think, fascinating is generally when you impose tariffs, the dollar gets stronger. But for the first time, I mean, I'm not that old, but it feels like I've never seen anything where you're seeing tariffs being implemented and the dollars are getting weaker.
I know this is the thing, right? You saw the big sell-off in the stock market yesterday, and this has sort of followed weeks of there being a trickle, if you will, out, sometimes very fast trickle. Normally, you would see that money go into the dollar, or you would see it go into the bond market, which are traditional safe havens for investors, because investors think that the U.S. economy is going to be strong, that the government's always going to pay its debts. The fact that you are not seeing that, in fact, you're also seeing a flight from these safe U.S. assets to something like a gold, does underscore that there is just this concern about what is happening with our economy, with our markets, and with our policy.
Yeah, essentially it tells me that the U.S., in terms of the way you think about the market, the rest of the world is bearish on the United States. They're selling the United States as opposed to buying. The other big news is that the president met with some CEOs of major retailers. What's the feedback that they're giving the White House? I got to believe at some point when these CEOs and these tech CEOs start to really put the screws to the White House, we may see the president pull back on some of this.
I think that's what a lot of people are hoping. A lot of companies are hoping. The sort of official readout from the meeting was pretty, I would say, tame amongst the three, or sort of the retailers that were there. They basically said this was a great meeting. We're looking forward to focusing on the U.S. consumer. But if you think about these companies, Walmart, Home Depot, Home Depot particularly, when you think about the tariffs with steel and aluminum and sort of these home building projects. Each of them have different exposure when it comes to the tariffs, but in general, they are focused on a consumer that wants to spend more. And the tariffs in general, we know, are creating negative consumer sentiment. So I imagine maybe the conversation was a little bit more flavorful than their official readout.
We used to say when I worked at Alliance Bernstein that volatility is your friend, but with friends like these... Kelly, thank you very much, as always. I appreciate having you in studio. All right, this hour, the Supreme Court is hearing arguments over children's books with LGBTQ themes. We're going to break down the case and the impact the ruling could have on public schools nationwide. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. As nearly 1.4 billion Catholics are mourning the death of Pope Francis, many are reflecting on the legacy he leaves behind. CBS News special correspondent Nora O'Donnell has more from Rome about the plans to lay the pontiff to rest.
Pope Francis won't be buried at the Vatican like most pontiffs. Instead, he will be buried here at the Basilica of St. Mary Major. It is the largest and most important Marian church in all of Rome. And Pope Francis loves this basilica and has visited it over 100 times, coming here to worship before and after every single one of his international trips. The Holy Father prays to this specific Byzantine icon of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's called Our Lady Salus Populi Romani, literally means salvation of the Roman people. We visited the Basilica and went inside to see the area where it is believed Pope Francis will be laid to rest. It'll be inside or next to the Pauline Chapel in the Basilica, where he has spent so much time. We learned that after he had surgery in 2021, he came here to pray before returning to the Vatican. And it really is beautiful inside. Pope Francis won't be the only pope buried here. There are 7 other popes inside, but Francis will be the first in more than 350 years. When we met Pope Francis last year, we learned how he is devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Just above our interview was the painting of Mary, undoer of knots, inside his home in Casa Santa Marta. Pope Francis discovered the saint in the 1980s when he was going through a dark time, and the devotion resonated with him because it symbolizes Mary's role in the undoing of the knots of life's problems. This funeral for Pope Francis will follow many of the centuries-long traditions for popes, but there will be changes. He made changes to the funeral ceremonies just last year. And so his funeral will symbolize, in many ways, his papacy, the simplicity and humility.
All right, I want to bring in the former mayor and current council member of West Hollywood, California, John Ericson. Thanks so much for joining us, sir.
Great to be here with you.
So, John, you visited the Pope in 2023. Tell us about that trip and how that conversation went.
Yes, I was able to visit the Holy Father in November of 2023 as part of a group from an organization that he was passionate about called Scholas, that helped make sure kids were talking about their communities and able to play sports and work through all the issues that we see young individuals facing today. The city of West Hollywood at the time started a partnership with Scholas and wanted to make sure that we were doing all that we can to promote that type of activity. And I had the opportunity to meet the Holy Father. And it was life-changing, and it's memories I've been sharing and with family and something I'll be carrying for the rest of my life.
You also presented him with a gift. What was it, and what did it symbolize?
Well, I represent a predominantly LGBTQ city. I myself am a proud gay man, and being able to go and stand before the Holy Father as a gay Catholic myself and give him not only our city flag from the city of West Hollywood, but as well as a proclamation from the city of West Hollywood, thanking him for his work on speaking about equality for all, but working to make sure that gay Catholics all across the world felt more included, and that, like he has said many times, who is he to judge, were critical things that I wanted to make sure the city was able to bring him in recognition of not only his faithful service to our community, but trying to open the doors of the Catholic Church in every way, shape, and form to all of us.
It's one of the things I asked some of our papal contributors as we consider who the next pontiff will be. What kind of leader, what kind of advocacy would you like to see from the new pope, given that Pope Francis was so inclusive, the people's pope, as he's been called? Are you concerned that the next pontiff may be perhaps more traditional and not carry forward Francis's progressive ideas?
Well, I certainly hope that the message of humility, unconditional love, and moving beyond labels, especially in a church that has over 1 billion members, is something that we can see with the next pontiff. For me personally, not only did Pope Francis reopen the world of the Catholic Church for me as a gay Catholic, but for so many others, as well as the work that he did to promote women within the Catholic Church as well. These are doors that are proudly open, and we must make sure that they don't go backwards in doing anything that we can to continue the progress that he really pushed forward. That's his legacy, and let's continue to push forward so everyone feels loved and accepted.
It's an excellent point that you make. I recall back in 2024, in the weeks leading up to Easter, the annual ritual washing of the feet, which he had done before, washing the feet of Muslims and prisoners and refugees and migrants. This time last year, he washed the feet exclusively of women, which was unprecedented. And it's sort of a simple act, a pious act, a Christ-like act, but it was seen as sort of groundbreaking just in its level of inclusivity. Really interesting. John Ericson, appreciate your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's turn now to what's happening with Harvard University. The university has sued the Trump administration over its decision to freeze more than $2 billion in grants. The school claims the government cannot identify any rational connection between anti-Semitism concerns and the variety of research it has frozen as a punishment. CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman joins me now to talk more about this. So, Katrina, tell us more about the university's position in this lawsuit and how the administration is responding. It strikes me that this is one of the first large institutions to push back on the president, and perhaps they may find themselves on their back feet.
Vlad, you're absolutely right. Harvard is the first university to stand up to the Trump administration. Some of their arguments here are that their First Amendment rights are being violated by the Trump administration, saying that they're going to take away this funding from the university, that it infringes on academic freedom and would create leverage over the academic institution for them to wield this. They also say that civil rights statutes are being violated here. And as you were referencing, Vlad, what Harvard says is that a lot of the impact of this would actually be on hospitals, on very important medical research, things that have nothing to do with the anti-Semitism that the Trump administration says it takes issue with. The president of Harvard is Jewish. He says that he does recognize that there are some issues with anti-Semitism there, and that is something he plans to tackle. Now, the government's response is that they say that this funding for Harvard is a privilege and that Harvard is not complying with the conditions that they need to continue receiving it.
All right, let me switch gears here and ask you about the Alien Enemies Act. You're going to a hearing about that later today. What can you tell us about it?
Vlad, this is a hearing in a case that was filed in the Southern District of New York, and it's related to the Alien Enemies Act. Previously, there was a temporary restraining order that was issued preventing the deportation of any Venezuelans under the Alien Enemy Act to El Salvador. Today's hearing will be about whether the judge wants to issue a preliminary injunction. But what's really significant here, Vlad, is that a lot of the issues that are going to be discussed in this courtroom are also before the Supreme Court right now, because the ACLU who brought this case has also appealed to the Supreme Court related to a different case in Texas. And part of what's going on here, Vlad, is that because the Supreme Court said that these cases have to be filed where detainees are confined, they're coming up all over the country. So the ACLU wants the Supreme Court to provide nationwide guidance on this, on what kind of notice has to be given to these men, on the form it should take, on how it should be explained to them, how they can contest it so that more people aren't sent to El Salvador and essentially left there with the government saying they have no way to bring them back.
Wow. All right, Katrina Kaufman, report back to us when you come out of that hearing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are keeping a close eye on a potentially dangerous storm system moving across the southern plains. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Kate Bilo with the first look at the national forecast. Hi, Kate.
Hey, Vlad, good morning. Yeah, we've got a pretty nice day across the Northeast, but like you said, it's the southern plains and parts of the Southeast that are in the threat zone for severe weather today. So let's talk about what to expect and the timing of this as well. We'll start with a look across the country where, again, we've got some pretty quiet weather across the south. We're looking at, or across the south and southwest, I should say, 70 degrees out there today across parts of Utah, 73 degrees in Denver. We're looking at those storms really taking shape here this afternoon and evening across portions of the southeast and then developing later tonight over West Texas and Oklahoma. In the meantime, as you head into the northeast, what a beautiful day it is. As showers clear the coast, it's nice and warm, 78 degrees today in New York City. We're looking at 80 here in Philadelphia. But let's talk about that severe weather threat. Again, this is the first zone to watch. You see the storms moving into portions of Mississippi and Alabama. These storms could bring the threat for damaging wind and large hail, as well as heavy rainfall. But later tonight, this is about 8 o'clock Eastern time, 7 o'clock Central time, we'll start to see storms really fire up here in West Texas. And as these continue to move eastward through the overnight hours, they will continue to coalesce into kind of what we call an MCS, or a mesoscale convective complex, basically just a big mass of rain and thunder that's going to drift down toward the Gulf Coast, bringing with it lots and lots of rainfall. Severe storm outlook really maximized across West Texas, cities like Lubbock, Midland, down toward Fort Stockton, and then right up into portions of central and eastern Kansas. There's a marginal level 1 risk all the way up into Chicago with that next developing system. The first round, which will be ongoing through this afternoon, a level 1 risk for portions of the southeast, and that extends into the Carolinas as well. But there is a non-zero risk for tornadoes here in West Texas as well. As these storms form, there is some indication that a few supercells could kind of break off from the main line of thunderstorms and start to rotate. And that's why a 2% tornado risk doesn't sound like much, but what we want is 0. So tornadoes cannot be ruled out here in West Texas. Damaging winds maximized here. Again, West Texas right up into Oklahoma. And that's also where we find the greatest potential for hail in excess of 1 inch in diameter. Vlad, I'll send it back over to you.
Kate, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Still ahead, how some local churches and parishioners across the country are paying their respects to Pope Francis. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Bells tolled in Catholic churches all over the world after Pope Francis died yesterday. Parishioners mourned the pontiff during services in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. That's, of course, where the Pope grew up. In Rome, prayers were held at the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where Francis has chosen to be buried after Saturday's funeral. Worshippers across Cuba, Bolivia, and Colombia honored the pontiff as well. And in France, services in the Pope's honors were held at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The death of Pope Francis and his lasting legacy can also be felt in places he never visited. CBS News Detroit reporter Jordan Burroughs brings us a look at the pontiff's impact on the Motor City.
Around the world, people are paying their respects to Pope Francis, including right here in Detroit, in a period of mourning. Back in February, Pope Francis appointed Archbishop Edward Weisenberger to lead the Archdiocese of Detroit. Now let's take you inside the Church of the Most Blessed Sacrament. In front of a small crowd of parishioners, daily Mass, coinciding with the news of Pope Francis's death at 88 years old. The leaders of the church, along with those in attendance, praying, hoping for peace for the first Latin American pontiff. Church leaders on his impact.
Yeah, the legacy of Pope Francis continues the legacy of all the popes and the person of Jesus Christ, that the church continues to be a beacon of love and mercy to all.
I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, because he wanted to go out with a bang. He didn't want to die, in some hospital bed and saying, hey, the Pope's, passed on kind of thing. He wanted to go out with a bang, so I think he got what he wanted.
Pope Francis left his mark in Detroit not too long ago with the appointment of Archbishop Edward Weisenberger to lead the diocese. Roughly 900,000 Catholics are a part of the Archdiocese of Detroit. Pope Francis never made an official visit to the Motor City, but when he stopped in Philadelphia, Mayor Mike Duggan urged him, and so did thousands of others who wrote letters to him and the church to come to Detroit. Parishioners told us the Pope's death was a shock, but they're grateful to have learned and spread his message.
It meant a lot because I went to Rome a couple of times, and when I seen him after he was sick in the Basilica, standing up there with the people after he had been sick, it just really touched my heart to see how strong and how God works.
That was Jordan Burroughs reporting for us from Detroit. Thank you, Jordan. All right, today is Earth Day, and a lot has changed since the annual call to action was established 55 years ago. We'll explore the policies protecting the environment next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
The CBS News Special, Earth Day, a question of survival, with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. A unique day in American history is ending, a day set aside for a nationwide outpouring of mankind seeking its own survival. Earth Day, a day dedicated to enlisting all the citizens of a bountiful country in the common cause of saving life from the deadly byproducts of that bounty.
That was Walter Cronkite reporting on the very first Earth Day back in 1970. Earth Day, deadly byproducts, a question of survival. The day was established the same year the Environmental Protection Agency was founded with the mission to protect human health and our ecosystem. But a lot has happened in the more than 50 years between then and today's observance of the day. So joining me now in Studio 55 is CBS News national correspondent, responsible for all things climate, David Schechter. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So It's so like there's a rosy tint of nostalgia when you look at a report like that. Sure. When the headline, the lead of Walter's introduction is a question of survival. Yeah. When he made it seem that our survivability was at stake here in making sure that the environment was sound over the future for future generations, and we're nowhere near that now. So what's changed from the way we thought about it back in 1970 to now?
Well, I feel like that was a galvanizing moment in 1970. The Cuyahoga River in Cleveland had caught fire, and the American public was outraged about what they were seeing because there's just oil slicks and chemicals all over. We've made a tremendous amount of progress since Walter Cronkite's report, but I still feel like what he's saying, that we're still in this fragile moment, a moment of peril, that the environment is not something you can just fix and move on. It's a continual process. And today our air is cleaner, our water is cleaner. But with the Trump administration has essentially been removing regulations, removing funding, and really things that will challenge the environment. Very pro-business moves, but not so much for the environment. And I think that puts us in a fragile moment where that fight that Cronkite was talking about, it continues on today, very much so.
You know, two things strike me. One, which is that as a people, as Americans back then, we were very optimistic. We were almost idealistic about the things that we thought we could fix. We thought that we could fix equality for all. We thought that we could, and I mean, not just black and brown people, but women as well. The Equal Rights Amendment, the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. We thought that the world was just going to be a better place by those young people who attended Woodstock, the baby boomers. They really did envision a world where the age of Aquarius, to coin that song, was going to come to be. Instead, what you just referenced, the regulations that the Trump administration is removing, those regulations were put into place to prevent corporations from destroying the planet. There's this notion out there that if you don't recycle, well, you're contributing to the demise of the environment, when it's really not just somebody who forgets to compost their food that's destroying the environment. It's big business, and what we're talking about now is removing the protections that we are afforded because we want to allow capitalism to fester.
I think what you're talking about, to some extent, is personal responsibility versus corporate responsibility and government responsibility. Yes, we should recycle, right? We should do our part to whatever we can
100%.
do. But you and I are not going to recycle our way out of
what we're facing
crisis
right now, right?
So that's the essential issue: is how do you view the role of government? So here's the federal government under the Biden administration with the most aggressive climate policies in the world, reducing emissions that would come out of our smokestacks, out of our tailpipes, and then a new president who is repealing or eliminating or gutting all those regulations. And so what is the way forward? Really, you got to look to, right now, states and cities and counties and community groups that continue to do amazing things. We were in Philadelphia for a project we were working on, and we saw right next to the airport, there's an enormous marsh that the Fish and Wildlife Service and the community has enhanced, and when it floods there, the sewage that comes out of rivers goes in there, is filtered naturally. It prevents flooding into neighborhoods. This is a local solution that is the kinds of things that we see are happening everywhere.
I'd like to see more of that. David Schechter, good to have you in studio.
Great to be here.
Nice to have you.
Happy Earth Day.
All right. Happy Earth Day, folks. That does it for me, but stay right where you are. After the break, Mugo Diwe is live from San Francisco with all the news breaking from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.